Alaba Giridvaradari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaur Bhakta Vrindam Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Ayaṁ Vishnupad Paramanza Parajakacharyasta Saratar Srimad His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. ISKCON Founder Acharya His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jayam Vishnupad Paramanza Parajakacharyasta Saratar Srimad His Divine Grace Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur Ki Jai. Jayam Vishnupad Srila Gorkashore Das Babaji Maharaj Ki Jai. Jayam Vishnupad Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur Ki Jai. Jayam Vishnupad Srila Jagannath Das Babaji Maharaj Ki Jai. Nantakota Vaishnavrinda Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Prem Sigo Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shiva Sarigor Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Jai Shri Shri Radha Krishna Go Gopinath Sham Kund Radha Kund Girgabadan Ki Jai. My Pranavadi Dham Ki Jai. Tulsi Devi Bhakti Devi Ki Jai. Samaveda Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to Shri Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga. Hari Hari Bol. What's that? Oh, you might be asking for too much there. I don't have the experience of a lot of the devotees here, but we're going to see what we can do. Okay. So today is the third canto, chapter 31, text 15. Yan-māyayoru-guṇa-karma-nibandhane smin. Sāṁsārike pathi caraṁs tad-abhiśrameṇa. naṣṭa-smṛtiḥ punar ayam pravṛṇīta lokam. Yuktyā kayā mahad-anugraham antareṇa. Okay. Yan-māyayoru-guṇa-karma-nibandhane smin. Sāṁsārike pathi caraṁs tad-abhiśrameṇa. naṣṭa-smṛtiḥ punar ayaṁ pathi lokam. yuktyā kayā mahad-anugraham antareṇa. yan-māyayoru-guṇa-karma-nibandhane smin. sāṁsārike pathi caraṁs tad-abhiśrameṇa. naṣṭa-smṛtiḥ punar ayaṁ pravṛṇīta lokam. yuktyā kala mahad-anugraham antareṇa. Your turn. Ladies? Māyāyoru-guṇa-karma-nibandhane smin. sāṁsārike pathi caraṁs tad-abhiśrameṇa. naṣṭa-smṛtiḥ. kayā mahad-anugraham antareṇa. Yat of the Lord, mayayā, by the māyā, uru-guṇa, arising from the great modes, karma, activities, nibandhane, with bonds, asmin, this, sāṁsārike, of repeated birth and death, pathi, on the path, caran, wandering, tad, of him, tad-abhiśrameṇa, with great pains, naṣṭa, lost, smṛtiḥ, memory, punar, again, ayam, this living entity, pravṛṇīta, may realize, lokaṁ, his true nature, yuktyā, by what means, mahat-anugraham, the memory of the Lord, the mercy, antareṇa, without. Translation by Srila Prabhupada. The human soul further prays. The living entity is put under the influence of material nature and continues a hard struggle for existence on the path of repeated birth and death. This conditioned life is due to his forgetfulness of his relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Therefore, without the Lord's mercy, how can he again engage in the transcendental loving service of the Lord? Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. The Mayavadi philosophers say that simply by cultivation of knowledge, by mental speculation, one can be liberated from the condition of material bondage. But here it is said, one is liberated not by knowledge, but by the mercy of the Supreme Lord. The knowledge and conditioned souls gains by mental speculation, however powerful it may be, is always too imperfect to approach the absolute truth. It is said that without the mercy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, one cannot understand him or his actual form, quality, and name. Those who are not in devotional service go on speculating for many, many thousands of years, but they are still unable to understand the nature of the absolute truth. One can be liberated in the knowledge of the absolute truth simply by the mercy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It is clearly said herein that our memory is lost because we are now covered by his material energy. Arguments may be put forward as to why we have been put under the influence of the material energy by the supreme will of the Lord. This is explained in Bhagavad Gita, where the Lord says, I am sitting in everyone's heart, and due to me, one is forgetful, or one is alive in knowledge. The forgetfulness of the conditioned soul is also due to the direction of the Supreme Lord. A living entity misuses his little independence when he wants to lord it over the material nature. This misuse of independence, which is called māyā, is always available. Otherwise, there would be no independence. Independence implies that one can use it properly or improperly. It is not static, it is dynamic. Therefore, misuse of independence is the cause of being influenced by māyā. Māyā is so strong that the Lord says that it is very difficult to surmount her influence. But one can do so very easily if he surrenders unto me, mam eva ye prapadyante. Anyone who surrenders unto him can overcome the influence of the stringent laws of material nature. It is clearly said here that a living entity is put under the influence of Maya by his will. And if anyone wants to get out of this entanglement, this can be made possible simply by his mercy. The activities of the conditioned souls under the influence of the material nature are explained here. Every conditioned soul is engaged in different types of work under the influence of material nature. We can see in the material world that the conditioned soul acts so powerfully that he is playing wonderfully in creating the so-called advancements of material civilization for sense gratification. But actually, his position is to know that he is the eternal servant of the Supreme Lord. When he is actually in perfect knowledge, he knows that the Lord is the supreme worshipful object and that the living entity is his eternal servant. Without this knowledge, he engages in material activities. That is called ignorance. Namo Vishvadaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Shrimanti Bhaktivedanta Swamini Namane Namaste Saraswati Devam Gauravani Pachanane Nivashesha Sunyavati Pashkata Deshatarane. So, those of you who know where I've lived for nearly the last 40 years can probably immediately see in the first sentence of this purport, there's a lot of material here that I could talk about quite a long time, but we've only got about 15 minutes. And I'll repeat that sentence. The Mayavadi philosophers say that simply by cultivation of knowledge, by mental speculation, one can be liberated from the condition of material bondage. So, it might be worth mentioning just how absurd and silly, and there's many, just like we have different denominations of Christianity and we even have different denominations of Hinduism, there's different denominations of Mayavadi philosophy, and they all go about it in their own ridiculously absurd ways of trying to figure out what the purpose of life is, or negating the whole concept of any purpose of life. For example, I have a tendency to, because we're not so close to the temple, so I have to go out and sort of find places to be engaged. So I'll go listen to some of these people, and if given an opportunity, I might challenge them a little bit. But I've actually been to lectures where they start, and they love starting with Om. In fact, one of the charts that I have is all about Om. And they'll sit there and chant Om for a while. Actually, sometimes they start with just silence, and then after a couple of minutes of silence, then they'll chant Om. And at the end, I'll say, do you understand what Om is? Or should ask them, what do you think Om is? And the answers are quite extraordinary, quite creative, and always absurd, because they really don't know why they're chanting. The vibration of the universe, it inspires me, I can feel my soul vibrating, all sorts of things like this. But actually, the reason why Om is important is it's mentioned 3 times in the Bhagavad Gita, and it's a representation of Krishna when you don't know that you should be chanting Hare Krishna and not Om. Not that we have really an objection to it, but it's a lower level of understanding of who the Supreme Personality of Godhead is. It's actually an impersonal way of approaching him. So, after they do a couple of minutes of silence and after they do Om, sometimes, and I'm not making this up, the speaker will say, "Thank you all for coming. And if any of you have expected to get any deep realizations or any astounding thoughts about the purpose of life, then you've come to the wrong place." And it goes downhill from there. I mean, it's really amazing and fantastic. So then another thing that happens, so like I said, there's all sorts of different denominations. And frequently they're what they call satsang, which is a total misuse of the word, because satsang actually means to sit with the truth. and they don't even have a concept of what the truth is because they don't want to actually read anything in the Vedic literatures. It's all generated from their creative imagination. But so they have different varieties of ways of trying to extract. It's exactly what Prabhupada's talking about in this purport. They're trying to extract a concept of what life is all about. From what? Their own very vain and extremely incompetent mental speculation. And of course we know Krishna is extremely, one of his qualities is that he's totally renounced. And he not only couldn't care less if they want to spend how many billions of lives doing this sort of nonsense, but he'll even give them all sorts of destructive and creative ways to even get more absurd. So one of the techniques that's been promoted by, I'm not going to mention names, by some of the people that are teaching these different philosophies is to, okay, well, we all know that we're kind of like got problems. They don't actually understand the 4 flaws of the human nature, and the biggest one is cheating, which I don't think they know about that one. But they'll say, okay, well, we know we make mistakes, and I can't get along with this guy, and I can't get along, so we all have these problems. But we're going to solve that problem by all coming together into a big room, and the concept is, okay, so you don't understand anything about math, and you don't understand anything about gardening, and you don't understand about cooking, but we all have our skills and our talents and our special gifts, and if we just pool all that energy together, somehow or another, even though we're totally imperfect beings, we'll come to some perfect realization. That's the theory. But what actually happens at many of these dialogues, and it's easy to understand, there's always a very small percentage. These dialogues could measure between 10 people to 30 people. So 5 or 10% of the people that attend these dialogues are the ones who already know it all, and they totally hijack the concept of leaving all your ego outside so we can all kind of come to the truth. And it just goes from crazy to absurd. And you hear all this crazy stuff. Bhadra and I went to one of these recently, and in this particular case, there was a couple of people who were supposed to like sort of guide the whole dialogue. And this individual was very proud about, okay, don't try to think about what you're saying because you shouldn't be thinking too much about it because that's a trap. It's like, okay, then what should you say? I mean, it's really unbelievable some of the things that go on when you don't have Srila Prabhupada's transcendental explanations of these Srimad Bhagavatam and the Bhagavad Gita. I mean, it's called the Wild West of the mind. It really is. It's exactly what Prabhupada's talking about. The knowledge of the conditioned soul gained by mental speculation, however powerful it may be, is always too imperfect to approach the absolute truth. And Krishna is so renounced, he'll say, okay, go ahead, have at it. Go ahead, try to figure it out. It's kind of like, I think some of us may have had the opportunity when we were about 6 or 7 or 10 years old, child sees the father driving and he wants to drive. So what's daddy do? He puts him on his lap and he lets him steer the steering wheel, but daddy's got control of the brakes and the gas. And he's also holding the steering wheel at the bottom. But the kid's sitting there thinking, oh, I'm driving a car. So Krishna's like that. He's, oh, you want to have at it? Go ahead, have at it. He's just sitting there laughing, actually, he doesn't really pay any attention to it. It's so absurd. The material energy deals with them. He deals with all that. I actually had somebody approach me once. Like I said, I've lived in Hawaii for 40 years. It was a lady who was having a relationship with this man, and he was a hardcore impersonalist. And what I mean by that is some of these people, like I said, there's many different flavors of this Mayavadi philosophy. And they'll say things like, even your concept of self, that's an illusion. Of course, René Descartes said, I think, therefore I am. That's not their philosophy. They say, you think, therefore you're an illusion. Stop thinking. I know it's, at least for myself, understanding and appreciating what Krishna Prabhupada gave us, this is where people end up when they're too proud to do what Krishna is saying here in the purport, or Prabhupada's teaching us in the purport. You have to be willing to surrender. You have to be willing to give up this concept, hey, I can figure it out on my own. I know one of the real convincing things that brought me to Krishna consciousness is when I heard somebody, a devotee, teach at a class just like we're having now, and he said, no, you have 4 flaws, right? Propensity to make mistakes, imperfect senses, the propensity to fall into illusion, and cheating. Yeah, cheating. The big one, the biggest one. And I went home and I spent a lot of time trying to find the loophole. How can I somehow or another not surrender? And the thing is that, again, Krishna's very detached. You want to cheat to yourself, you want to cheat yourself, okay, have at it. Just cheat yourself. And the beauty of it is that I kept wrestling with that for 6 months. I go, oh, okay, figure it out. And that's the problem. Imperfect senses. Oh my gosh, I could not find the loophole. And my own personal integrity was, if you can't find the loophole, the only truthful alternative is you got to surrender. And that, of course, became a whole other problem, is how am I going to go about doing that? But that's the power of actually hearing from pure devotee and getting the philosophy straight. And of course now we all know there's all sorts of disputes and arguments and different alternative philosophies that are being generated in the name of Krishna consciousness. But here's the radical thing that I've realized dealing with a lot of these different spurious offshoots of what Prabhupada gave us, is that I actually feel that Lord Chaitanya has allowed and even encouraged some of these things, because ISKCON is a pure organization. And even though we all know, and we're all still working through our shortcomings and the problems, we all have, like I said, we all have different talents and we all have different shortcomings. But one thing is that you stay with people who have an integrity to recognize that we're all working through them together, then we all graciously move through the difficulties and we mature in our Krishna consciousness. But if you're not willing to hear or take advice or give or be in the association of other people who are also have that personal integrity, then you don't want to be, you can't, you don't have what it takes. It's like they say, what separates the mice from the men. You don't have what it takes to be in ISKCON. So Lord Chaitanya said, okay, we'll create these other silly organizations, and many of them are really pretty much going as absurd as what we see with these Mayavadis. They're just, you can't reason. Prabhupada said you can't wake somebody who's asleep, who's pretending to sleep. You can't reason with unreasonable people. Just stop it. It's not going to work. Chanaka Pandit says, even a wise man comes to grief by trying to give good advice to a foolish disciple. So that's one of the wonderful things that, it took me a while to realize that. He said, how do you deal with all this stuff? Lord Chaitanya created it because the beautiful thing is that Krishna is so extraordinary, and we all say it, and we've heard it over and over and over again. He's the all-attractive one. So guess what? He attracts everybody. Even some really, shall we say, logically challenged individuals. In a politically correct way. They're out there, and they get attracted to Krishna also. And they may come, and then there's even some little disagreement or some little frustration. And admittedly, we all make mistakes. And maybe it could be a very simple little mistake. Could be a big mistake. We've made big mistakes too. But they don't understand that's the shortcoming of the individual. It's not what Prabhupada gave us. It's not the essence of what's being taught in the Krishna conscious philosophy. Of course, there's going to be mistakes. But also, a devotee is very forgiving and humble. And he doesn't take it as if, you know, I don't deserve this kind of treatment. Right? A devotee always sees everything as Krishna's mercy. So whatever happens, go back to that and see what it is that might be disturbing you when somebody does something that you find is offensive, or I don't need to put up with this. And then you go run off and you fall into all sorts of... Krishna's very kind. You, okay, fine, go out there. There's plenty of options. Prabhupada, Bhaktisiddhanta used to say, Prabhupada shared with us that there's the cheaters and the cheated. And if you want to be cheated, there's a lot of people out there at all these different flavors of ways that attract you to be cheated, where you'll actually think that you're growing and maturing in your Krishna consciousness, when in fact you're just going further and further down into the dark well of complete ridiculous nonsense behavior. So this is, like I said, I could speak all day on this. But two verses that I've taken note of here. So in the second chapter of Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna actually asks Krishna, he said, well, because one time I asked somebody, what is your definition of enlightenment? Oh, he's very proud. Said, oh, I'm going to tell you. And he went on and on. And well, you know, he kind of knows the world's there, but he doesn't know the world's there. And he kind of knows what's right, but he also knows what's wrong. And he kind of, you know, he doesn't affect any. It was just blah, 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 blah. And when by the time he got done, I said, you know, you sound like I asked you the question, what is the qualifications to be put into a mental hospital? You contradicted yourself. You made absolutely no sense. And I mean, this is the kind of stuff that goes on. So, what is the definition of enlightenment? Or what are the qualities? Arjuna asked Krishna, what are the qualities of somebody who's actually mature in their realization? Because it says in the Bhagavad Gita we're all flawed. So, okay, well then how do you sort through all these possibilities? So the answer that Krishna gave, he said, O Partha, when a man gives up all variety of sense gratification which arise from mental concoction, and when his mind finds satisfaction in the self alone, then he is said to be in pure transcendental consciousness. And if you actually give that some thought and think about it, when you're getting, and I'm sure all of us have had that experience, when we just in our quiet space and we're realizing, how fortunate am I to have been given the opportunity to be called in the service of Lord Chaitanya. That thought alone is very deep and satisfying. And at that moments, when we have those moments, it's like it doesn't matter what's going on out there in the world, because Krishna's actually engaging us right at that moment. And that's why it's so frustrating, because other people are not experiencing that assurance. And somebody said, what was it, one of the things in the last 2 days, somebody was saying how Prabhupada was preaching about how I'm very confident in which way my consciousness is going, because I've been taught by my spiritual master and I've understood the Siddhanta, or the essence of the Bhagavatam. And when you have that kind of confidence, nothing shakes you. There's a verse about that in the Bhagavad Gita. Having heard this, I'm drawing a blank. But you're not disturbed. You're completely, and that's what Atmaram means. You're completely satisfied in the self alone. So I'm going to wind it down a little bit here, give everybody an opportunity. I'm trying to respect the clock. If anybody has any questions or insights, then we can draw. Mahatma?
Thank you very much, Prabhu. You mentioned in the early part of your class that Krishna's indifferent, or he doesn't...
Detached.
He's detached, right. And that you said something about him laughing. Then the question arises, why is it that Krishna comes repeatedly or makes himself available in so many different ways, if that were the case?
Okay, I think I actually pulled back on the laughing part. He's detached. But the thing is, there's the verse in the end of the Bhagavad Gita says, I envy no one nor are partial to anyone. I am equal to all. But then he even contradicts himself a little. He says, yet one who is a friend to me, I am a friend to him. It's kind of like, for the majority of the time, for the non-devotee type, for the people that are being actually, all their behavior is being controlled by the modes of nature. We see that. People get angry and boom, they're right immediately in the mode of tamagun. And everything they're doing is based on whatever that intermediate action area is. So devotees are, to even enter into the process of devotional service, my understanding is you've got to at least be in the mode of goodness, or have some influence in the mode of goodness. And ultimately, what we call pure devotion is when you have no influence of anything except for goodness. So, I think the nature of what you're asking is, and I'm not even so convinced it's Christian. That's one of the things the Christians have a big problem with. They think that God is dealing with every one of us, and okay, I'm going to strike you down, and you're a sinner, and blah, 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 blah. That's not really our philosophy. Krishna is enjoying in the spiritual world with all of his loving devotees and associates. The material world is described as a machine made of the material energy. I sometimes refer to the old, they don't have them anymore because it's all digital, but the old, I think they called them red box machines outside of stores where you could get a video and you could push a button. I want a drama. Okay, push the button that wants drama. I want a comedy. I want a Western. So the material world's like that. What do you want? You want to act like a jerk? Okay, we'll give you the jerk routine. You're going to be down there in the modes of tamagun. Okay? If you want to get something, I mean, I think it's pretty obvious that if you adopt the qualities of the mode of goodness, generally life works a little better. You don't have the problems. Especially, it's very obvious when you look at the darker sides of the mode of ignorance. People get really intoxicated and then they fall into these hardcore drugs. Their whole life is just how to get a fix. Krishna's not involved with that. The machine of the material nature is saying, okay, just deal with that person, give them the mode of ignorance, they push that button. So that's what I meant in terms of, it's not so much that he's, I agree with you, I don't like that term. It's not that he's indifferent. He's transcendentally detached. If you want those kind of, if you don't want to, it's more like if you don't understand or if you don't have the good fortune to being able to actually be exposed to the philosophy of Krishna consciousness, then you're just caught up in the machine of the material energy, which is all the modes of goodness. And it's explained in the Bhagavad Gita that a wise many seat, that's all that's going on. It's the modes of nature playing its game. And only when somebody has that extraordinary fortune to come in contact with the pure message of the Bhagavatam. Now, that's why Lord Chaitanya says, this is the nectar for which we're always hankering. It's like, wow. But we're all so bewildered by this machine of fantasies, and Prabhupada explains a little bit about that, I think, later in this purport.
I would just like to add to your answer, which was excellent, that Krishna is still fascinated and therefore compassionate, fascinated that what is it in him that attracts these conditioned souls?
He's all attractive.
What is it that attracts all these, let me find out and come down in my form of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to discover that and share it?
Yeah. That's the beauty of the whole message of Lord Chaitanya. Satchinarli?
In the 11th canto, 14th chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam, Uddhava and Lord Krishna are having a conversation in which Uddhava is asking questions to Lord Krishna. That there are already many different philosophers who propound, how to be happy or what is the perfection of life. And then he says that, he asks Krishna, which will be the best? Because we know that you propound devotional service, which is the ultimate. But in that one, Krishna gives a different, he explains the whole creation and how every living entity is placed according in the universe, according to the desires they have. So then he knows this has been going on and it will be going on in the future. So now my question will be, so since they are there, they're exercising their free will, Krishna is fulfilling their desire, he's compassionate, do whatever you want, he's detached. So then, as propounders of this philosophy, devotees, when you meet this kind of people, if you have, if you have the understanding, maybe it wouldn't bother too much, but unless they try to present that they have the absolute truth, that they're this is the topmost. At that point the devotee comes and, isn't it? I'm just asking a question. Otherwise it's like...
I think what you're actually asking is what generically would be thrown into the category of the art of preaching. Because it's an art, and we all have different ways of approaching it. And we know some devotees are very head-on, full guns blazing. And I know early, we know Tamal Krishna Maharaj is probably best characterized as that. He was very definitive and just, why are you wasting your life? Become a devotee. And the mood of the public back in the 70s, because we were all children of the Vietnam War and all the, the flower power and all that stuff. Actually, this is something that I've shared with a lot of people, is that there's a certain branch of people that say, if we just go back to the 70s, then everything will prosper like the 70s. That's not going to happen. The world's changed a lot since the 70s. I mean, the 70s, we were called, what is it, what's our generation? The baby boomers, thank you. I'm drawing a blank. But then what came after that, immediately they call them the MTV video kids, like that. And now we've got Generation X, Y, and Z, the millennials. And if you look into, of course these are loose kind of denominations or ways that sociologists refer to what the different divisions in the population. But the MTV kids, they're all into Club Med. I don't care about you. It's me. I'm important. I don't care about welfare. I don't care about doing philanthropy work. By the way, philanthropy work is the alternative to Krishna consciousness. I have a whole list of things that these people go into. And Prabhupada mentions that. He says, when you don't have a concept of God, but you want to feel good about yourself, you go out and do philanthropy. Because you don't have to deal with God. You just say, oh, I'm a nice guy, I give a lot of money away, and I build schools, and I do all this stuff. But as we all know, we do those sort of activities, but that's not our primary mission. Our primary mission is to actually educate the soul how to get out of the material world. We don't necessarily take cataracts out of people's eyes so they can live another 10 years and they can see and then go back to hell anyway. I mean, it's like, it's just self-defeating when you actually understand the concept of reincarnation, which is in itself, it's another thing I ask people. Okay, if people talk about reincarnation, they say, okay, well, how does it work? Well, I don't know, it's just kind of like if you want to be a dog, you just say, I want to be a dog, and you become a dog. But somebody actually said that to Prabhupada once. He said, well, what if I want to come back? He said, you have my blessings, be a dog. Somebody was trying to outsmart Prabhupada. He said, okay. I actually had a friend of mine in college. Again, I mean, this is what people talk about. And it was before I became a devotee, and he used to always say, sometimes I think I would just rather be a dog. They just run around playing and, chase frisbees and do all sorts of things like that. Yeah, in America, but go to India and see what the life of a dog is, and you'll change your mind real fast. So it's really the nature of the art of preaching. And I don't really feel like it's appropriate to try to say it should be this way or it should. I mean, there's certain no-nos. Obviously, you don't want to preach the glories of the Lord to the offensive, to the, what do you call it, the unbeliever, so to speak. Faithless, yeah, thank you. So there's certain guidelines, but the beauty of it is we're all, this is another thing that's extraordinary. There's millions of people. And even if you're a twin, they're still different than you. There's no two people that are the same. This is a big problem for the Christians because they have this idea that in one life you have to figure it all out. And if you don't, then you're in big trouble. But if God is fair, then we ought to all be coming out of like an assembly line, and we're all given the same equipment and the same intelligence, the same senses, literally like things coming off the end of assembly line, and they're all exactly the same. Okay, you're all equipped with the exact same equipment. Now you all have to get to this destination, which is you have to understand God in one life. This is one of the questions I frequently throw at the Christians. I say, well, how do you explain that? Some people are born with a silver spoon in their mouth, and other people are born in Biafra and are scraping through the desert trying to eat grubs out of the ground just to survive. And they're both expected to get to the same destination? And if you understand anything about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, you go, that's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. So, I think, you're a Sankirtan devotee. You meet people all day long. And you never know how they're going to respond. And yet you have the focus to know that no matter how they respond, even the most indignant person, which I'm sure you meet a share of those, you say, okay, they're pressed that button and they're playing that little routine that the material nature has programmed them to respond to you in that way. And that's all it is. And you don't take it personally. You just, okay, next person, maybe I'll get somebody who pushed the goodness button. And then you can have a dialogue and you can maybe distribute a book. Okay? Any other questions? We're getting a little later here. Prabhu?
Thank you. That was a very spectacular class. Yeah, I had an interesting experience. I was doing Harinam down in Huntington Beach last week, and there were these two guys. They were standing there with their bikes watching me. So I went over to them and, I gave them one of these things that I distribute that, has the Maha Mantra on one side and the Veda to read books on developing higher consciousness and supreme happiness. Visit vedabase.com on the other side. And it turned out they were Methodist ministers.
Huh.
But like you say, they were like in the mode of goodness. They weren't like these fanatical Christians that you usually run into in Huntington Beach. And we had a really nice dialogue, and I explained them the Christian conscious philosophy and everything, and I had told them that I was brought up in, and I told them, when they told me they were Methodist ministers, I told them, well, I'd been brought up in the Methodist church. My parents were strong Methodists. So then by the end of the conversation, one of the ministers, he said, yeah, you don't know it, but you never left the Methodist church. Because what I was explaining to him, he was actually realizing that was the real essence of what the Methodist Church was all about.
He saw that in the philosophy of Krishna consciousness.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's nice.
Yeah.
That's nice. And ultimately, if you can preach nicely, and thing is, you have to bring yourself down to their level of awareness. They've sort of been stymied with a lot of, if we're going to talk about the Christians, most of them are in the mode of goodness. there's a few, every tradition has the fanatics who bomb the World Trade Center, so to speak. And we are aware of the fact that we have quite a few fanatics that say they're presenting Krishna consciousness when no, they're off in that other land where they're not teaching properly. But I'm also part of the interfaith group in Ventura County, and one of the things that's really, I'm seeing a movement. Every faith on the face of the earth that I've experienced are all aware of the fact that things are going from bad to worse to like really nuclear solutions, literally. And nobody's comfortable about it or likes it. And they all understand that it's because of a lack of God consciousness. Of course, they're all thinking because they're not part of our tradition. But I mean, it's all part of the realization that the world is getting worse. Kali Yuga is having its fun with us. But there's a division within every different philosophy, every different denomination, every different faith. There's a small percentage of these people who are coming to the point where they're going like, we got to get away from this. My faith is better than your faith. In fact, I believe not only the last pope, but even this new pope are making gestures of more inclusiveness. One of the things I've asked a lot of Christians is your concept of Christianity, interfaith, an oxymoron? I mean, and it's interesting because a lot of people haven't really stopped thinking about it. It's like, what do you mean? Well, is your understanding of in Christianity the concept of interfaith, is that an oxymoron? Meaning it doesn't fit anywhere. And like I said, everybody's different. In fact, I've also asked a lot of people, both Radharani and I have done this a lot. We'll talk to people and say, well, you realize you've got these 4 flaws, and we go down the list and we share them with them, and they go, okay. And then they go right back into whatever they're saying. It doesn't even get through the ears. It doesn't register anywhere in the thinking machine. It's just, that's the modes of nature. They're so bonded. Gunas, the ropes of the modes of nature, are so strong that even when you give them this tremendous tidbit, which I explained was the main thing that really drove me back to Krishna consciousness, is like I could not find the loophole. So this is all the art of preaching. And we all have something that was some way of preaching that you learn the hard way, but you'll learn. Anyway, I think we need to stop here. So thank you all for your patience and excellent questions. Hare Krishna.